Hello everyone, it's Code and Anastasia, and our special guest today is Sophie Fernandez. So she's the head of business development at BGI Accelerator. Sophia, it's such a pleasure to see you here today. So you are welcome here.
Thank you so much, Anastasia, for the invitation, for the kind invitation. It's my pleasure.
So it's just great to talk to you here today. And as you are the head of business development at BGI, I would like to ask you, first of all, about BGI itself and about the role of BGI in promoting non-European startups in Europe and in the USA.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, BGI started back in 2009. And the goal was actually, it started as a partnership between the Portuguese government and MIT. So the goal was to develop 3 stages in Portugal. One, to support researchers, so with scholarships for them to do their PhDs and continue research. The second one was for them, assuming that the deep tech comes from scientific areas, they could do a Lisbon MBA that was powered by MIT with some business schools in Portugal. And finally, let's imagine that they really had the research, they really understood the key topics from an MBA, so from the basics of a master in business and administration, and then they would go for the market. So that's where BGI came in. So BGI was the tech transfer of the MIT Portugal initiative. So we were very focused on a venture competition of startups that would be amazing if they cross all of these sectors. Let's say stage 1 of research, stage 2 of MBA, and then stage 3 for us. But what happened was many times we were working with startups that have nothing to do with any of the MIT previously. So they were doing research, they start trying to make some sales, they were not being able to reach the market, and so they look for BGI to support them. BGI, how do we support startups? We have training, individual training, we have parallel training, we have peer training. Everything was ever done online for us because most of our mentors are from MIT, which is like, let's say, the house that gives us all the resources at the beginning. And so we still keep with a lot of our speakers, mentors, inspiring speakers and all of that came from MIT. So everything was online until the last moment. So the last step was actually taking people to US, to Boston, and then in Boston they would meet with potential investors mostly. And so that was our goal at the beginning. Obviously, we had a lot of startups from Portugal. That was the main reason why the Portuguese government was involved, right? Because they wanted to boost the innovation ecosystem in Portugal. But soon we start receiving startups from all over the world. Actually, right now, over 80 countries have applied to BGI. So it's not even Europe anymore. And indeed, we have startups that are from America, North and South. We have some startups that are from Asia. We start having from Hong Kong, from India, Sri Lanka, Indonesia, Malaysia. So we start having startups from several places, but the methodology is always the same. It's the methodology we followed that came out of MIT. So it's called e-teams. It's let's say it's really a methodology, and then obviously our goal is always to fundraise with those startups. BGI at the beginning, as I said, was a non-for-profit, and so we were working with the startups for free, and the Portuguese government was obviously supporting. Actually, the public entity who was doing everything at BGI was the university, was Isqueté. But then further on the line, we were one of the very few government initiatives who became profitable. We started looking into what could be a business model. So we were taking equity on the startups that reached success through BGI. And so then we got a very interesting portfolio of startups, and obviously private investors start getting interested, and we were acquired to Isqueté, and now we are a private company and also a service provider. So we grew from what I just explained you to do acceleration programs, open innovation programs, and education programs like summer schools, hackathons, etc. So we are now a company that started almost with one person in Portugal, which is our CEO and the founder. And then now that we are 15 people plus all the interns. So now we have a different dimension, and but we keep doing it, and we have programs where our clients just want Portuguese startups. We have programs where we have just Mexican startups. We have programs depending on the client, we will look for it. But our BGI Accelerator, which is the one that no one pays us to do, the one that we actually get equity on the startups, we still do it because it's, let's say, our flagship, was how we started, and everyone knows BGI very well for that. So we keep doing that program. And that one, any startup from any part of the world can apply. And if you have what it takes, you will be selected. You'll be on the top 5, 6 that we select, and we will do BizDev for the startups. So I would say it's an acceleration program on steroids, because we do the typical mentorship program, one-on-one meetings with clients, blah, blah, plus we became part of your team for the first year. And so we will come to the team, we will do your sales, we will support you fundraise, we will make you materials, we will improve everything inside the company and teach how they can continuously do it over time. So we can teach them how to, let's say, how to fish, and we don't give them the fish. So that's our strategy. And yeah, and then hopefully they will get to success, which so far we have managed to do, not with all of them, unfortunately, but that's the startup world, but on a very, very high percentage. So actually, we work with startups that are very, very early stage. So we typically talk about a technology readiness level, the TRL, which is an indicator that can go from 0 to 9. We start working from 4. So they have a prototype, and the prototype might still go to the client, and the client not liking it. And typically startups have between 1 to 5% success rate. At BGI, they have around 65% success rate. So it's extremely high for the startup world. So that's why we keep doing it.
BGI has just a great history, and the results are just impressive. So that's crazy what you're doing, and I think it's very fruitful and useful for startups. So, but for startup to get into the acceleration program, BGI acceleration program, they should apply, they should fill a special form, and you review this form. And what are the criteria that you are looking at while accepting startups?
So the most important criteria for us is obviously the technology. And if we see we have the network, because once again, because we are a success, let's say a success-based startup ecosystem, only if the startup has success, we can manage to go forward with it. So for us, it's absolutely crucial that we see if we have the network, then can support the startup. If we do have the network to support the startup, the next step, obviously, it is related with technology. If we see that it is unique in the market, so we do some due diligence, understanding and because we receive so many applications, some technologies we receive 50 times, not even kidding, 50 times the 50 different startups doing the exact same thing. So we need to understand, definitely it's a hot place to be, right? Because a lot of people is doing it, but we need to understand which one of them is the best and why. So we are obviously looking into that. And the most important aspect for us, which is the team. The team for us is absolutely crucial. And I'm saying that the team is important in terms of having everything, management and science, exact science, everything. No. We just want to understand the reason why the startup is doing it. I know that sometimes people say, it's kind of a little bit this fuzzy story behind the passion, but it's going to be so hard for the startup, and they will have to endure so many no's. I mean, we have one very successful startup that before getting a very good yes, they got 93 no's. Most of the startups quit because they, if you try to date someone and you'd go on 93 dates and everyone tells you they don't like you, obviously you'll feel you're ugly, right? So this is what entrepreneurs go through. So it's a lot of no's telling you that whatever you're doing, it's really not working, it's really not good. And because we work with disruptive innovation, meaning that typically typically doesn't exist in the market, and people think that it's a little bit voodoo, and these guys came from university and don't really know about the industry. So the kind of personality in the core team, the founders, for us, it's important. And you can immediately see with small questions, if they fight amongst each other, if they easily agree, if they are on the same line. And for us, that is even more important than anything else, because what we have, and we have very successful cases of startups who started one industry and then they pivot, because when it doesn't work, you just need to be resilient and try to enter in the market who accepts you first. But that personality trait is very difficult, and it's very difficult to assess, because typically they send you a CV, and on the CV, what can you know from the CV? So that's only from the interviews that we have with them. And sometimes even on the interviews, you can check that then it really doesn't work. So it has already happened that we accepted people on the project, on the program of BGI, but then we say, okay, let's just forget our contract, forget everything, because we don't see this working. And most of the times, actually all of the times, is because of the team. It's not the technology, because the technology, you can understand it, you can ask for the patent, or you can, you can ask for the demo, but the team is the hardest thing to assess. But that's it. So network, what can BGI give you? Can we make you big or no? Technology, obviously, and team. Those are, like, we look into more things. Obviously, we want to see if there's profitability in the market. We want to see if there's a gap that we can fill, but that's more or less inside the opportunity. And if we believe in the technology, we will create the opportunity. That's what accelerators do, right? So yeah, so those are the most important things we look for.
Okay. That's very important, I understand. And you said that you usually accept only about 5 or 6 startups. How many applications do you usually get?
So it depends on the years. We have applications on full for all the BGI programs. We receive close to 500 applications, but some of them are just for European startups, or are just for Portuguese startups, or are just for a specific country Portuguese startup, a specific country startups. For the BGI Accelerator, which is the general one, we receive around 200. It depends on the years. Sometimes we receive more, sometimes we receive less, but on average, it would be around 200, 220 applications annually. And we only accept, we used to accept more, but the program was only BGI. And now, because we have so many others right now, we are trying to make it 5, 6 maximum, because it requires a lot of our time and resources. And once again, it's not being paid, right? Because we have this agreement, which is called a SAFE, a secure agreement of future equity, meaning that if I bring you clients, if I bring you investors, I'll get equity on the startup. So it's very risky, right? It's the riskiest model you can have, because you have to dedicate a lot of senior people and experienced people, and not having a fixed fee is very hard. But we managed to do it, and now it's our model. So it's our secret sauce. So we keep doing it, obviously. And yeah, so that's why we only select 5 or 6.
Yeah, I understand. And what part of equity do you take?
Yeah, it might depend on the cases. In some cases, we do business development agreements where we can take a percentage of sales or a percentage of capital raised. And in that case, it's a business development agreement, and it depends on the amount of sale. It depends on the stage of development of a startup, because if you have never made one sale in your life, it's going to require me a lot of time to build all the materials. So I'll probably get a higher percentage in that case. If you already have some basis, for instance, if you are already established, let's say in Germany or France, and now you want to expand to US, or you want to expand to I don't know, Italy, Greece, I don't know. It's different, because then we have some basis on it. And so the percentage that we required is less. So it's really assessed on case by case, and also on how big is the sale, right? Because one thing is having a sale of 1,000 euros, and another is having a sale of 500,000. And it happens because we have startups with different business models. So we need to assess that in order to pay the work that we have for the startup, and the work that we're having with all the other startups that are still not paying off, because some startups will never pay off. That's just the reality. We spend time on them and it doesn't work. And then on the others that we actually do the entire job, and they typically are the very early stage ones, we get 3% equity. So that's typically and they have the turning point is a 3 million valuation on the startup. BGI gets 3% equity. So these are for the ones that have a technology readiness level that is still low, and so they prefer to just have BGI support on everything. Then BGI gets equity on it, and BGI might invest. We have a small fund, so we might still invest in some of the startups.
Yeah, that's great. And I think the equity rate is not very high, because I read a lot about different accelerators, and 3% is not that high, I think. Okay, and so the startup, for example, one startup applied to the BGI Accelerator. Then you say yes, probably we want to have an interview with you. And what questions do you usually ask during the first interview?
Some of the questions that we typically ask are very related with the technology. So we read all the application, and we typically start with those questions. Some parts, and the team that goes for the interviews is very different. So we have engineers, we have managers, we have VC experts. Sometimes we even ask for industry experts to be like, I can ask, let's imagine that you work in the retail industry with an application or a software. I might ask someone from Walmart to be with us, a mentor, someone from the industry that really understands it, if it will have a fit or no. And so the questions when we start are typically very related with the technology. How does it, because for us, deep tech, and because we have an MIT DNA, it's absolutely crucial that the technology exists and that it's different from what we see in the market. And then obviously we start trying to assess the market opportunities. So far, what have they researched? Once again, we don't expect them to know a lot, but we just want to understand a little bit also how much time have they put as an effort to these, because most of them are still having other jobs. So we just want to understand, is this for real, or it's just something that they created over 2 years, but they don't have the stamina to make this happen. And then after that, we try to understand the team. So we always try to ask for all the founders to be on the meeting, and we start asking strategic questions for the future. Some of the questions might be about the exit, if they see themselves on the startup forever, or if they see an exit. And you know, for us, the VC world works on an exit model. You need to sell your company to someone else in the future, because that's how you make money, right? Not out of dividends, especially because we have in our portfolio companies, we have equity in over 20 startups, but we don't collect dividends, because you want to use that money to grow the startup, to invest in new human resources or platforms, whatever it is. So you never get money out of dividends. You get money when you do an exit, when you sell it. So for us, those kind of things are important to understand. And it's also important for us to just understand how much time will they dedicate to this, what are they doing in their lives. And then it is true that entrepreneurs in general need to spend more time in general, okay? Obviously, I know that there's some people in corporate who work 20 hours per day. No, that's impossible, but sometimes they work 20 hours per day. But in general, as a rule of thumb, an entrepreneur will have to work way more hours than a normal person. So we need to understand if that fits with the lifestyle of the person. Because deep tech, once again, I'm not saying sometimes we have this notion or idea or perception that startups are a cool place where, you know, you have flexible work, you can work from home, you don't have hours of work and blah, blah, blah. It's a very fun place to work, but for the founders, for the guys who are going to make it happen, those are strategies that they use to attract the talent, because in which way will they fight with the big four or with the big corporations? It will have to be with different strategies. So this is startups being creative to attract talent, but the entrepreneur itself, the founders, they have to work as much as a CEO of a big corporation as, I don't know, L'Oreal, Unilever, you name it, Bosch, Pfizer. The CEO of those companies will not work more than an entrepreneur. So we need to understand the lifestyle a little bit of these entrepreneurs. And I'm not saying that not working 20 hours will make you fail. That's not what I'm saying. And we obviously try to have a very balanced life, but we need to understand if you have what it takes. And it takes a lot to be a successful entrepreneur. And I think that more and more people have the idea and the impression that it's easy because you have so many success cases, but what they don't see sometimes is the amount of years before the exit, the amount of years you spend on the startup. Okay, great, you make 50 million, perfect, you are a millionaire now. But you know, it took a lot of family dinners, it took a lot of times that probably you didn't see your kids fall asleep or you didn't have dinner with them. Many times that people were on holiday, they were on the pool, and here you were on the computer answering the email, sending the proposal. You know, all of those things you don't count with them because you don't, but they exist. And so these have to be very positive people, and we try to assess. So many of the questions we ask on the interviews go into that. Try to understand if you have that profile after the technology. And obviously, we also ask a little bit of the research because that also shows you how committed the person is with the technology. Yeah, but those are mostly the questions we ask.
Yeah, that's very important, and the questions are great. Thank you. And how often do you take startups? Do you take them once a year, or you have 2 batches? How many of them?
So at the BGI Accelerator, now I'm just going to focus on that one. On the BGI Accelerator, we open the call in February, March. We close it in May, and in June we kick off the program until June of next year, because we always have 1 year. And so the batch of 5 startups will be for an entire year. Only next year we'll accept others. But because many times, for instance, if I start working, let's say that you are one of my startups, I start working with you 1 year ago, but probably I still have some clients that I'm supporting, etc. So we don't just stop working with you. So we typically have what we call a phase out of 5 years. Until 5 years, BGI still keeps working with you, scheduling you meetings, etc. If you have still questions how to do stuff, BGI is there for you, but not on a full-time basis like we are with the startups that we accepted this year, right? This year is our main priority. And sometimes we have some startups, and this already happened, from 8 years ago that now are doing a Series A or a Series B, and they need BGI support again. And we drop stuff, we focus on that, and now it's fundraising. Once again, you cannot forget that BGI in those cases has 3% equity. So we have to help because that's also in the best interest of BGI. So that's but we only take 5 to 6 startups per year. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And did you have any experience of supporting startups from Russia or CIS countries, for example, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, Belarus, something like that?
We do, and we have an exit. Same bug is a Russian startup that we had an exit in US. Most of our exits are in US. I think that only one of our exits was actually in Europe. All the others were in US. We do, in that case, very specific case, it was more related to cybersecurity, and we do see that Russians are extremely strong in that area, and the Nordic countries are extremely, let's say, entrepreneurs. So we like to work with them. Right now, this batch, I just accepted a Russian startup as well, Easy Point. They are already deploying pilots in Moscow, but now we are supporting them deploying in Europe and the rest of Europe. So we have it, but typically we accept startups on those cases that they've been working more with data analytics, security, ICT. Those were the areas that we have worked the most. We have also had one startup from Belarus or Russia that had a different kind of keyboard for you to use that was extremely ergonomic. We also sold some items on that one. Let's see if it can boom. So it really depends, but I think that data and cybersecurity have been the strongest suit, at least for the startups who apply to BGI.
Okay, thank you, great. And as BGI works both with the European market and the American market, what are the for you, for your accelerator, what are the key success factors that help startups to enter these markets, and how do these factors differ in these two markets?
Yeah, so I have to say, number one is that in US you cannot. In Europe we are extremely polite. We never say no, but we don't say yes. So you are always in what we like to call a NIM situation, which is like not a no, not a yes, you're just like a yes, okay? So you're there and you're there stuck for several months and then you don't close contracts. In US, things are much more aggressive. For instance, I already presented in some cases investors to our startups. Startups get offended because the investors are so aggressive, asking questions and all that. In Europe, we still don't have a lot of that. Well, we are starting to have now because they have learned with the Americans, but it's not a status quo like it is in US. In US, they want to make business fast, yesterday. If you don't reply in 24 hours, the due diligence is done, you don't work enough. For instance, in Europe, that will be unthinkable. People wait for like 1 week, 2 weeks for an answer. Our entrepreneurs, I try to tell them every single time when they go to US with me, guys, this is not Europe anymore. You need to reply in 24 hours. Oh, but the weekend, it doesn't matter. Just say that, have an auto reply on the weekend, say, I will answer you on Monday. Or if you can just reply, I still don't have the proposal, I will send you, and then you give a deadline. But you need to answer to people, this is the most brutal situation, because Anastasia, I have emails of investors in US who say, Sophia, you present us great technologies, but these guys don't move. And then the guys in Europe are like, we don't move, we are doing pilots, we have sales. Like, it's a different reality because they just are very fast answering. They are extremely connected all the time. And I feel that, for instance, there's a lot of people who know me, and I've been working for BGI for the last 5 years, so I create very easily good relationship with these people. And so I'm even like, sometimes I receive those emails, I'm like, I know I'm gonna have to tell you something in 24 hours, just wait for a little bit, I still have some other stuff to do. So it's a different pace, it's a different routine that we have. And I'm not saying that the Americans work more hours than the European, I'm just saying that they prioritize relationships on a very high level. Then for us, it's much more important to have the proposal very pretty to present. For instance, we can see that with speakers from US and from Europe. European always have a good template with everything pretty, with the logos, etc. The Americans might not have that. They might even have pictures of their kids. They are very informal, but they don't forget the most important part, which is the connection with the client. And then they also do something that the Europeans don't do, which is Americans assume that you are always talking with a dumb person. And for Europeans, we always assume that, my technology is amazing, but I only talk with people who understand my technology, because if you are not understanding my technology, I'm not going to sell it to you. You are not my target. So this makes a huge difference, because Americans can then sell rocks, literally. They had a company who were selling rocks, like a Tamagotchi, but a rock. So you cannot lose the rock. You have to have the rock with you. And this solves, because you just have to make it very easy for people to understand. So, and the truth is, Europeans are not dumber or smarter than Americans. So the only thing you need to understand is that you always have to talk as you were talking with your 4-year-old kids or niece or sister, I don't know. So the important thing is that Europeans always go on high level, thinking that they only talk with high level people, because everyone else does not exist in their world. And Americans have that always, like, I'm talking with dummies. If you ask the hard questions, I will answer them, but I will start with the idea that everyone does not understand anything I'm talking about. That makes a huge difference. And then I think it's about ambition. For a European, we find a lot of excuses to not grow. Let's imagine, and I think that this case is really interesting. Salesforce, the founder of Salesforce went to Steve Jobs and asked him, how can I grow my company to be the biggest CRM tool in the world? And Steve Jobs told him, you have to think that you have to grow 1,000% per year. If you tell this to a European, oh, that's impossible. How can I sell 1,000%? The American, he looked into this and was like, okay, of course he didn't grow 1,000%, but that was the goal. And he closed 150 clients in the first year. That is impressive. And we don't have cases like that in Europe. The ambition of these guys is so high. And we Europeans are much more, let's say, humble on the numbers, and we are always very realistic. Oh no, this year I will only close 3 clients. Why don't you put 10 clients? 10 clients, it's unrealistic. But why is it unrealistic? Don't you think you can have 100 meetings? Out of 100 meetings, will you not convert 10%? And all of these things that for Americans are so quick and easy, for the Europeans are not. So we see, I think that relationship wise, the way you sell it and the way you pitch it, and then this sector of ambition that is insane. And also it has to do with the market, because once they start selling, they sell, even if you have different counties, the laws are very similar, and there's no really barriers to go from Texas to Massachusetts, so so on and so forth. For us to go to Portugal to Spain, from Spain to France, from France to Russia, there are much more legal stuff for you to work. You have to do language adaptation. So it's harder. And so they are just, for them, it's just easy to grow. Not easy, but in their minds, it's easy to grow quick. And for us, we always see it as fragmented. You never say, I'm going to grow in Europe. You say, I'm going to grow in UK, Germany, and Belgium. So it's a different kind of setting. And so that, I don't want to say that the Europeans are less ambitious, but sometimes we fail for being too realistic. And so we need to push ourselves. There's something that Elon Musk says that I think it's extremely interesting. Make your plans for the next 5 years. Now reduce it to 6 months and make it happen. And of course, you won't probably make it happen in 6 months, but you will learn so much on the process, because you will put so many to-dos on your timeline, everything. You will just try to make everything. And this puts you on the situation, on speedos, that those Americans entrepreneurs typically are. And yeah, I think that those are the 3 huge differences between working in Europe as an entrepreneur, working in Europe, and working there. And by the way, if you come with the speedos to Europe, the corporate, that typically are your clients, because we sell mostly B2B, right? The startups. If you're B2C, it works. But if you're B2B, they think that you are just like, these guys are too much, like they are too nervous. It's like, because you are unsettled. We are calm people. Europeans are efficient, but calm and realistic. And so we think that these things, Americans are just too much, it's too much bling bling. We don't like that. But it's not true, because it works. So I think we can learn from both sides. I think that could be interesting. When we take European startups to US, a US investor is always more keen to believe a European than an American. So in one sense, we create credibility because we don't bullshit, So we go a little bit, we are more reliable. But then we fail on growing as fast and being as ambitious and replying as fast and being so diligent, so fast. So I think that that's the big difference.
Okay, so you told me very, very interesting things, and I think it will be extremely useful for our startups to hear about this mentality of Europeans and Americans. That's extremely important to know. And I think the last my question here for you, I won't take much your time. So what would be your advice on go-to-market strategy in Europe and in America for startups? So their first year, their go-to-market strategy, what should they do and how they should implement and design it?
First thing, Americans will do this. Europeans won't, most of the times, generally speaking. Talk with the clients, call him, go to have a meeting. Oh, but I still don't have a product, it's not ready. It doesn't matter. Just go and try to check if they would buy it. Would they do a pilot with you? That would be my first thing. Talk with them, just talk. You have clients, ask them, interview them. Don't be afraid when you receive a phone call from your client. Just take the call. And you have to understand for the startups, any startup, you have to understand that you have to be always available for the client, because there's nothing. Imagine that you, Anastasia, let's imagine that you go on a website, you purchase a bag, okay? The delivery at home, and then the bag comes with a problem. If you call and no one tells you anything, no one answers your email, you will immediately say like, I'm never going to buy anything on this platform again. It happens the same thing for the startups. If something goes wrong with your product, you cannot be afraid. You just have to deal with the problem and try to solve it as fast as possible. So talk with the client, be very honest. If the startup is failing, perfect. Now you are developing. Most of the problems that the startup is so focused on, product development. I have to be perfect when I get to the market. You are never perfect when you get to the market. iPhone had the crash, I think that in 5 or 6 years ago, because the map didn't work. And it's iPhone, it's Apple. It's like if these guys can fail, any other person can fail, right? So it is okay. There are bugs, there are problems. Don't be afraid to listen to the client. Don't be afraid to ask for what you can improve. And most of all, create a relationship. If in the end they don't like the product and they will not renew, or they won't go from a pilot to be a client, they won't. But at least you know the reason why. Staying at home, just doing product development until it's perfect, will never get you to the market, because you don't even know what perfect is. You have this idea in your head. So that's the first thing that I would say that any entrepreneur all over the world should do. And the second is make sales, because many times they take too much time writing applications for public money, asking for pilots, non-paid pilots, blah, blah. Investors will not invest in you if you don't have profitability. So you need to, until you reach the 150K, this is like the mental number I always give to startups. 150K is the money you need to prove that, okay, I have a portfolio of clients. I have a way to maintain the business, right? So you have to look into that, making sales. And most of the startups don't have a salesperson. Most of the startups have founders and CEOs who are terrible making sales, terrible. They are like this all the time, and then they talk like this in a very strange way, very calm, and they are not interactive at all, and that's fine. You will learn it. It's a process. There's a lot of directors that you are going to sell to that are also not perfect in sales, but they will buy your product. So most of all, just go outside and sell. And then I think that the number one rule to fail is not having a plan. People always think like, oh, let's do this. And then if it works, we will continue to do it. If it doesn't work, okay, it doesn't matter. Just have it on a plan, have it structured, have a timeline, have KPIs and milestones. You have to think everything through before starting the business. And plans are made to be not fully fulfilled. You will have to adapt. You will have to do A/B testing. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Most of the times it won't work, but you need a plan. And the go-to-market plan is super, super important, because it starts with a plan like this, and then you go through those points. But for me, talking with the client since moment one, since inception of the idea, don't waste time if no one will buy it. That's just, that should be common sense. That should be something that your kid will tell you. But yeah, but startups don't do this. And so it's very, very important to that. Second, just sales are your priority. Since the product can be sold, you should start making sales and have the plan that you will adapt and readapt and adapt and readapt. But you need a plan, because this plan is strategic, is internal. Anyone in your company can use it. And that's important. And if you are to fundraise, or if you are to do an expansion, you already have it. It's easy. So have the plan. Those will be my 3 main advices.
Wow, that's great. And I think our talk was incredibly fruitful for startups and for me. And I had a great pleasure to listening to you. You're so nice. So just thank you for coming and telling us this information.
No, it was my pleasure. It is really great. This is what I love to do. I love to work with startups, and it's great because sometimes we are at BGI, we are doing this so much with our hands and talking with the startups, sometimes even screaming, you have to do this. And then it's good when you just try to think this as a general. Okay, now on the big picture, what am I doing with the startups? And what are the main conclusions? So it's a great exercise, and I thank you for also in inviting me in and giving me this opportunity, Anastasia.